Love. Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Those are the words of the Dalai Lama, who said that without love and compassion, the human species will not survive. I would argue that it's not just our species that will not survive without love and compassion, but that it's every single species on our fragile planet. I would also argue that compassion is our natural state. Compassion is the way God made us. When we are compassionate, the image of God in which we have been created becomes most visible and most clear. If you stand before a mirror one day and you look at the reflection and you say, I just don't see the image of God within myself these days, then go be compassionate. You will see, I can guarantee it, the image of God within yourself. And so will others. Compassion is our natural state. But look, you have to admit, we live in a day and an age where, as a people, as a nation, and even some churches across this nation seem to be moving further away from a compassion culture and more toward a cancel culture. Someone has a different political view than us, we slam the door shut on any potential friendship. Someone has a different social ideology, we strike them from our list of friends. I saw that guy wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. Canceled. I saw that guy wearing a red MAGA hat. Canceled. That one's a Democrat. Canceled. That one doesn't use my correct pronouns. Canceled. That one has green hair. Canceled. And why is it that folks seem to take such great pride in who they're canceling? And how they align themselves with this camp or that camp based on who gets canceled. And I want to know, well, where does the list stop? Minnie Mouse? M&M's? Mr. Potato Head? Seriously, do we cleave to our nostalgic past, so insecure about losing our version of the world that we would cancel anyone who might disrupt that version? You and I both know that the media is not in any short supply on ways to divide us. Brother against brother, sister against sister, American against American, Americans against people in other parts of the world. And nor are our politicians in any short supply of dividing us into different camps. Oh, they may preach the virtues of one nation, but they all benefit greatly from an America divided. Friends, I want to talk to you today about moving from a cancel culture to a compassion culture. I want to talk to you about how we as Christians might lead the way for this divided nation once again. How we might lead our nation away from being a cancel culture nation to becoming a compassion culture nation. But before I do, I want to say a couple things. I want to clarify a few things. First of all, when I talk about cancel culture, I'm not referring to those who've broken the law with their horrific crimes. The Jeffrey Epsteins and the Harvey Weinsteins and the Bill Cosbys of this world have been rightfully canceled. No, what I'm talking about is a spirit that stops up our ears, that hardens our hearts and snuffs out that God-given light of compassion, which is part of our being created in the image of God. I'm talking about spirits that get so divided that they're willing to build walls of animosity between brothers and sisters, even of the same faith, rather than build bridges toward understanding. A number of years ago, I read an article by Nancy Davis. Some of you know Nancy Davis to be the daughter of past president, the late Ronald Reagan. And in this article, Nancy Davis talks about getting canceled, although she didn't use that term. This was prior to a time when we branded this phrase, cancel culture. She talked about when she and her brother were just little kids, maybe 6, 7 years of age. And her parents would be hosting these cocktail parties or dinner parties with friends and neighbors. And she and her brother would sit at the top of the stairs, leaning forward to pick up on what the grown-ups were talking about. Ever been there? Nancy and her brother would be leaning forward to listen to what the grown-ups were talking about. And she said they could hear them arguing, hear them debating, even raising their voices in conflicted disagreement about politics, about policy, about what was going on in the nation. But she said, you know what? They always left as friends. No matter how much disagreement they had, they left as good neighbors. And they continued to work together to find solutions to what was going on in their local community and beyond. Now, there was a time when we didn't cancel one another simply because of a different political ideology or social stance on any given social item. I also want to caution us, before we go ahead and think we should cancel anybody, we want to make sure we've got our facts straight. There is a woman named Betty Hart, and Betty is a longtime communication strategist and leadership developer with Kaiser Permanente. And recently, Betty Hart had a TED Talk. TED Talk so popular, and I would recommend it if you get a moment, that it's been viewed already by over 1 million people. In her TED Talk, she said, if you're going to cancel anyone in your life, you have to be able to answer 2 questions with absolute confidence. The first question you need to answer is this: am I 100% sure that I'm right? Think about it. I don't know about you, but I can think about numerous times in my life where I was pretty sure I was right. I was pretty sure I was standing on the right side of things, only to have to come back and apologize, eat some crow, that sort of thing. So before you go ahead and cancel anybody, you might want to answer, am I 100% sure that I'm right on this? And the second question she says we have to answer with confidence is this: am I sure that the person I'm about to cancel can never change? I would put it this way: have I given up hope on them? Have I given up hope on God's ability to transform and lives and in their faith? I'd be willing to bet that every single person here could take a look back on their life 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you'd see a very different person than you are today, wouldn't you? You'd see that over time you have matured in your faith, you've matured in your relationships, hopefully. If you haven't, I'd be asking, what have you been doing? And then ask yourself, maybe the person I'm in disagreement with, God hasn't given up on that person, and maybe I shouldn't either. Oh, we may not be in the same place, and I don't have to endorse how they feel or where they stand just to be a friend or sibling in faith to that person. Well, guess what? Over 2,000 years ago, Jesus offered us an alternative to cancel culture. In the time of Jesus, there wasn't even a phrase, cancel culture. They had not branded it yet. But Jesus had a different way for us as people of faith to live. And his alternative to cancel culture was called love, agape love, or Lewis, agape love, as you recommend we pronounce it in the South. Agape love and compassion. In fact, before Jesus left this world, he gave us a brand new commandment. And I like to think it's as new today as it was then. It's something we have to practice over and over again. His commandment was this: love one another as I have loved you. In other words, love like Jesus. Love others the way Jesus loved others. Jesus said, in loving one another the way I have loved you, then you might actually be able to bear witness to the world, to the glory and the power of God. If you're loving others like Jesus, the world has a tendency to stand back and go, wow, we don't see that very often in this world. In a world that's canceling one another, these people are coming together and giving us a different look, a different image of who God is in this world. Love one another as I have loved you. In other words, if we're going to be part of a compassion culture, we're going to love sacrificially. We're going to love without walls. We're going to love without reserve. We are going to love with compassion. Just take a look at the way Jesus loved this world. He didn't love just those who were like him. He didn't lay his life down just for his friends. He laid his life down for all people, for all time. And he loved people who were even different than him. He didn't simply stay within the bounds of his own ethnicity, within the circles of his own social circles, or even within his own religion. Christ's compassion stretched well beyond every line, every human line that divided people. His compassion stretched beyond ethnicity, beyond language, beyond creed, beyond law, beyond religion, beyond gender, beyond geographical location. Now I'm looking out at the room here today, and most people here I see are old enough to remember the old Rand McNally Atlas. I love that Rand McNally Atlas because you could open it to the center and you get the full country, United States of America, a little bit of Canada, a little bit of Mexico. But sometimes you're like, where do I want to go? You could close your eyes, put your finger right down and go, oh, look, we're going to go see the world's greatest ball of twine. It's right there. Look, man-eating oyster. Drove down to Savannah. There's a guy sitting in a restaurant eating oysters. But the thing about that Rand McNally is when I used to look at it, I thought, that's not the way God sees it. So you look at that Rand McNally, and there were lines that separated cities and counties, and lines between counties and states, and lines between states and Canada to the north. And you all had lines too up there in Canada between your provinces. And there was lines that divided the line between the United States and Mexico. And I used to think, what does it really look like to God? See, God has compassion and mercy on us all and doesn't see lines, geographic lines, the way we do. God so loved the world, all of it. That didn't say God was in love with the world. There are a lot of behaviors we have in this world that God is not in love with. But God loved the world so much that God gave us Jesus, that all who would believe in him would not perish, but have eternal life. God would open that Rand McNally and it looked very different to God, right? Christ's compassion showed us that. Christ's compassion crossed all those lines, was never inhibited by those lines, so that he could reach people with the love and the grace and the mercy and the compassion of God. Now get this. I believe that Jesus' compassion was not even contained by the lines of time. Jesus' compassion and love are not temporal. Jesus' love and compassion reach beyond the lines of time all the way down 2 millennia to reach us here today. Christ's love, his mercy, his word, his spirit, all of that is not contained by the bounds of human time. It reaches us even now, even today. If we want to move from a cancel culture to a compassion culture, I think we got to love like Jesus. We got to love without those lines. I think that's what Paul was talking about to the church in Colossae that was so conflicted. They were dividing themselves against each other. You're in this camp, we're in this camp. And Paul's trying to teach them about Christ and trying to help them bring them together. And get this, Paul says in chapter 3, verse 12 of his letter to the Colossians, clothe yourselves with compassion. That's his answer to bringing a divided people back together. Clothe yourselves with compassion. You know, I have this little fantasy in my mind that sometime we're going to be watching like the Oscars or the Emmys, and these big limos are going to pull up in front of the theater. You know, they have the red carpet, and these celebrities are cruising down the red carpet, and the media, they're always got the microphone out, and they're asking them questions, and sometimes they say, who are you wearing? Just once, I want to hear a celebrity say, tonight, I've clothed myself with compassion. Wow. The world would be a different place, wouldn't it? We would see beyond the person to the God who's helping them clothe themselves with compassion. And I love the way Paul puts it in the Greek. It's actually a little humorous, partly because it's really hard to pronounce. Splagna oiktrimon. Say that 3 times fast. But it literally translates bowels of mercy. Yeah, I know. I see the eyebrows. What? That's what it means, bowels of mercy. But you have to remember that in the time of Paul and in the time of Christ, bowels were all your organs. It's everything within you. In other words, if you're going to have compassion, you're going to love others with everything that's within you. Your heart might soften or beat quickly or feel heartbroken when others are feeling heartbroken, right? You're going to feel what others feel. Now, the Italians came along and cleaned it up. They changed the word in Latin to compati or compassio, which means compassion. But literally it translates suffer with. In other words, to have compassion means we need to suffer with the other. Or we need to walk alongside those who are struggling or those who are hurting. For those who have fallen down, we need to help lift them up. For those who are hurting, we need to pray for their comfort. For those who are lost, we need to help walk with them as they navigate their way through a time of confusion or disorientation. That's what it is to have compassion, to suffer with. Betty Hart, in her TED Talk, says to have compassion means that we have to attempt to see the other in their totality, to see them as a whole being, or as a whole being that Christ loves all of them, not just a part of them. We don't want to write them off simply because they have one idiosyncrasy. No, we have to see them as a whole being and love them as a whole being, as we used to say, warts and all, right? We don't cancel people because of the warts. We love them warts and all. That's what it is to have compassion. Compassion recognizes that what makes us one is not our agreement on politics, policy, or even potato heads. But what makes us one is the Spirit of God which binds us as people of God. This God who loves us with mercy and compassion, who sees our world without lines and who loves us warts and all, says, you got to love like that. You want to love like Jesus? Love like that, because that's the way I love all of you. Now, friends, I don't need to tell you that this is a tough day, for sure. It's a hard Sunday. But I want to tell you how blessed I have been, and I pray that you're equally blessed in the gathering with each other today. We met in the fellowship hall, a bunch of us, before Sunday school class, our growing-up Sunday school class. And someone just playfully said, hey, Dr. Mark, what are you doing here? Normally I'm in my office, getting ready for sermon time and stuff. And I said, I just needed to be with some good Christian brothers and sisters today to find my strength. And I watched as I was in that fellowship hall the way you treated each other with compassion, how gentle and kind you were with each other. And I thought, y'all are loving each other like Jesus. And I came in the sanctuary, I saw the same thing. I came through the narthex, came in the sanctuary, and I thought, all y'all are loving each other like Jesus. I think that's what Jesus' prayer for us was all about, is that we wouldn't divide ourselves from one another, Gosh, you think about how different we are, and we could have a long list of all the things that make us different, but I can give you one thing that makes us one, and it's our faith in Jesus Christ and His faith in us. And it allows us to love like Jesus, with compassion and mercy for one another, and in loving each other with compassion and mercy. I want to, all those politicians who say, oh, our world's divided, I want to say, come to church, would you? Because if you went to church, you would see a people with all sorts of differences who put them over here to the side and find their unity in Jesus Christ. Last Sunday, we ended worship singing one of my favorite songs. It's not a high church song or anything like that. In fact, I think I first learned it at church camp on a guitar. A guitar, as my brother Don used to call it, called We Are One in the Spirit. We are one in the Lord, and we pray that all unity might one day be restored. That's what Jesus' prayer for us was, that we might all be one. And why? So that when we come together in compassion and love and mercy for one another, the world will know who we are and who it is who binds us together. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. Not by our politics, not by our policies, not by which version of Potato Head we've got, but by our love for one another. Friends, love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries, said the Dalai Lama. Without love, compassion, the human species, he said, will not survive. I would say the way we're going to be compassionate for one another is to love like Jesus. Love like Jesus here and love like Jesus out there. Love one another so that the world will know who He is by our love for one another. Praise be to God. Amen.